listen to who you are and where you're from today, I feel like I finally met the choir. And we're ready to speak to the choir. I'd like to share some personal reflections on alleviating poverty. Who is responsible? We are responsible for ourselves and for our brothers and sisters. As an American Baptist Protestant Christian, I believe that I am to be held accountable, that is, responsible for my behavior and my choices. I also am responsible or carry a burden to care for others. This concern is part of my faith understanding. It is true because I believe the well-being of others being valued and treated with respect, is a concern of God. As part of the human family, I'm intensely grateful that there was someone there when I was born. By the grace and design of God, these someones were capable and concerned enough to care for my every need. In fact, I inherited a whole network of family who took it to be their responsibility to feed and to bathe and to teach and to nurture and to love me. So I have to begin with this caveat, and that is that I'm speaking from an incredibly privileged position in our world today. This prevenient care welcomed me into the world. Part of the nurture and love which I received included an understanding and a commitment around the values of family support, community involvement, and social responsibility. So thanks to the outline that we have to work from, those three aspects: family support, community involvement, and societal responsibility. My history is profoundly connected to the faith and understandings and the experience of growing up in my family. So this family nurture and faith development becomes a source engaging me in a community-wide network, also known as a church, in my case, with a purpose, that is a mission to care for others as a witness to the spiritual gifts of our Creator God and an understanding of a beloved community, to borrow a phrase from, or a term from Martin Luther King Jr. The faith community then becomes a further mechanism of nurture and engagement of other forces, engaging other forces and spirits in the wider world. So the structure of this workshop handout, I think you will receive, or maybe have already, resonates with me and is a good starting point for conversation. It's kind of a chicken and egg systemic question, however. If the spirit-destroying, soul-crushing consequence of poverty intrudes on this caring, nurturing scenario that I just described, resources and motivations to pay it forward become derailed, or destroyed, or qualified significantly. Instead of a very positive investment of a human resource in the family and the community and societal levels of conversation, perhaps a very problematic deficit could and often does enter the equation. That happens around things around education and finance, personal resources, self-esteem, social standing, education, all the rest. Did I mention education twice? Yeah. Okay. I like to say that the life we share is a team event. That was the challenge, I think, and the proclamation of the Hebrew prophets and the way that Jesus taught. And also in the writings of the Apostle Paul. Each of these sources in the early Christian church was a way to redeem and reclaim a world where greed and slavery, usury, and a domination system was the acceptable norms of the day. And often the witness of the scriptures is about a liberation from that domination system. I'm borrowing that phrase from Marcus Borg, recently deceased, but a wonderful scholar, a biblical scholar and author. I like the description that Marcus Borg uses as he calls upon the prophetic traditions of ancient Israel and the challenge to bring the personal relationship with God, the individual, into the challenges of justice seeking in the wider world. I think this is one of the crucial challenges that we face today in our world. Quoting now Borg. 8th century prophet Amos spoke in the northern kingdom of Israel near the end of the long reign of King Jeroboam II. Kingdom of David and Solomon had divided into two, and the end of Solomon's reign in the late 1900s before the Common Era. The north, with its capital in Samaria, continued to be known as Israel. The south, with its capital in Jerusalem, was known as Judah. The two kingdoms were often enemies and sometimes at war with each other. The two kingdoms were often at war with each other. It was a time when the wealth and power of the monarchy and the ruling class greatly increased, and the condition of the most of the population deteriorated. Often in fierce language, Amos indicted the wealthy and the powerful and advocated the cause of the poor in the name of God. Thus says the Lord, and hear the word of the Lord ring through his oracles. His words included both indictment and judgment. End quote. Ward contrasts the kind of individualism that I certainly have experienced and being raised in this culture, balances that over and against an important sense of collectivism, a religious community addressing the wider world out of a covenantal stance with one another. Again, quoting Ward, the influence of individualism, he's now talking about our current life, not 900 BC. The influence of individualism extends beyond political and religious conservatives. It affects how a majority of American Christians understand biblical passages about helping the poor. According to a poll conducted in 2013, a majority of white Christians, Catholics, and mainline and evangelical Protestants believe that Jesus and the prophets were talking about charitable acts by individuals rather than our obligation to create a just society. But the passion of Amos and Moses and the prophets and Jesus and Paul was not that the wealthy and powerful increased their charitable giving. Still with Gord now. If a pharaoh or a king or aristocrats or emperors should donate more of humanitarian concerns, that was not the point. Charity is always a good thing and will perhaps always be necessary, but the prophetic voices of the Bible are about economic justice and fairness, changes in the system as a whole, and not primarily about charity or for individuals. This is from Marcus Borg's Convictions, How I Learned What Matters Most. So if the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians said, if anyone suffers, all members suffer with them. And so this is about the individual charity versus the collective voice and a challenge, bringing indictment and judgment. Just a little bit more about me, and then I'll get out of the way and let you talk. Growing up, I learned about individual charity. One of the most poignant moments was as our family was on the way to church one Sunday morning, walking along the street, and we were approached by a man who was looking for a handout. My father said, "You go on to church," and he stopped and sat down, took the man to a nearby restaurant and sat down and had breakfast with him. So that was a model about individual charity, not just a handout, but time and interest. And so that was a model about the individual level of trying to do something good. I also grew in my understanding about how to address what is right and wrong and how to speak to the challenges of making the world better. I grew up and was in college in the late 60s and early 70s. And there was a collective voice raised about the inappropriateness of the military-industrial complex and the wars that were raging in Southeast Asia. A voice that put thousands of some of my friends in lockup in I think it was the Washington Stadium. President Nixon at the time felt they were a threat, I guess. Anyway, I watched and learned what it meant to raise a voice about moral good and challenge an evil that was dominating the culture and the world in which we lived. So all of that is to say that's a spectrum. And although you, like myself, might be very comfortable with that individual charity approach, it's more important to figure out how we get across that bridge to raise the collective voice in a significant way with a moral voice. Our responsibility as a faith community, from my perspective, is a way to build beyond the individualism that is to be entrapped in a slavery of military-industrial complex and now technological complex and out of the domination systems and the illusion of a self-made man or a self-made person, to reclaim and develop a passion for the common good, to work together for the common good. Life, at its best, is a team event. To ask what is best, enabling us to value, respect, and love one another, each other, and every other, no matter how different we might be from them and they from us. That is what my faith tradition tells me to do. Thank you.